Good evening, a guten Chodesh. I am recording today, Tuesday, which is Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and we hope that Haba Leinu L'Toiva, that each and every one of Klal Yisrael will have only Besuras Toivas with Yeshua's Gedolos in Eretz Yisrael. Baruch Hashem, this week completes a cycle of 2 years that I've been saying the Shiurim. And last week we were a little disappointed. Usually our numbers are 300 to 400 on YouTube, and they went down to 100 to 200. So we couldn't imagine why. So Torah Anytime, which does its magnificent job, said that our numbers went up from the 600 and 700 to 2,200. So I would imagine that many have gone from the YouTube over to the Torah Anytime, which is a kosher Kiddush Hashem station. So Baruch Hashem, I'm happy to hear that. I hope the Rabbanu Shalom is happy and has a nachas ruach from the Divrei Torah that we share with Yidden, and that you, the listeners, feel that it validates that the time being spent is worth the effort and worth the value of quality time. It's all Chazal, and we try to stick to that format. The second thing I want to say before I begin with Parshas Toldos is that in one of my shiurim of the week, and I don't remember if it's this year or it's one of the others, somebody left me a question that I had said that the only one of the imahos of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah that had nevuah was Sarah Imenu. And I substantiated it with the Gemara in Megillah Daf Yud Daled that says beferish that there is Zion Nevios, and it mentions the names of the seven, and the only one of the most mentioned is Sarah. So, but we know that the others, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, that they had, because there's 3 levels. There's Ruach HaKodesh, then higher than that is called Baskol, like the Mishnah says, B'chol Yom V'Yom Baskol Yotzes Mehar Choyrev. Now, if a Mishnah says that every day there's a Baskol from Har Choyrev, then it's Kodesh Kedoshim. There's every day a Baskol. Do any of us hear the Baskol? We don't, because we're not at the level. Baskol is even higher than Ruach HaKodesh. But the third and highest level is Nevuah. And so I explained, without going into detail, that Sarah had the Koyach HaNevuah, and that Rivka, Rachel, and Leah were Baskol and Ruach HaKodesh. So they could see, but it wasn't the level of Nevuah. But other Meforshim, because you see Rashi brings in the Parsha that says that all 4 Emos were Nevios, had the power of Nevuah. So it seems like a contradiction to the Gemara. But Meforshim explain that Sarah not only saw, but she saw everything of the future. What would happen to Klal Yisrael, what would be until Mashiach comes, everything. And in her family, in Klal Yisrael. But Rivka, Rachel, and Leah could see, but only for themselves and their families. They couldn't see what would be in 500 years. Some explain it that way. So I just wanted to make clear that statement about Nevuah and Sarah Imenu. So I want to begin. The parsha begins, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avraham holid es Yitzchak. So Rashi right away brings the kasha from the Medrash that if the pasuk says Yitzchak ben Avraham, why does it have to say 2 words later, Avraham holid es Yitzchak? You just said Yitzchak ben Avraham. So the Medrash explains that the Avram and Yitzchak looked like twin brothers. They looked like twin brothers, and that was the reason why Avram Avinu went to save Lot, because he held it would be a chil Hashem, Meforshim say, if Lot remains in captivity, so they would claim that it's Avram. That Avram, who was the supposed one close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he was captured and kidnapped, and nothing happened for him. So he didn't want that to be said, and it would be a chil Hashem, so he went to save Lot. Now the Meforshim say over here that this was Keneged Leitzonei Hador, that the cynics and those who were very sarcastic would say that, oh, Yitzchak was born, it's not from Avram. She was in the house of Avimelech. Probably she became expecting from him. So therefore the pasuk said the genealogy, Yitzchak ben Avram, and then made the statement, Avraham hoiled es Yitzchak. But the Meforshim are curious, and the Mesilas Yesharim talks about this. It's a pasuk in the Torah, so it's being said extra for the Leitzonei Ador, for the cynics, that they shouldn't be able to say that Avimelech was the real father of Yitzchak. And they ask, who cares what Leitzonei Ador say or don't say? Is that what the pasuk, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrote a pasuk because he was concerned about Leitzonei Hador? And they answer and say, and this is what the Mesilas Yesharim says, yes. Because somebody could give a drasha for 2 hours, and it could be the most dynamic, erudite, beautiful drasha with Chazal and with Sipurim, and so interesting. And he finishes the 2 hours, and it made a big impression on the audience, on the people listening to the drasha. Then one person stands up who's a cynic and an expert at sarcasm, and he gives a hand wave and he makes a comment, and the entire crowd bursts out in laughter. And in that 30 seconds, suddenly the impact and power of the beautiful drasha was diluted to almost zero because of that person's joke about the drasha. So, in 1 second, say the Meforshim, here in Olam Hazeh, the cynic could definitely do something and say something that can do away with the most important and exclusive and vital point made to a person about Yiddishkeit, and it withers away. And that's why it was worthy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to go out of his way and say Avraham holed es Yitzchak for the cynics, because the cynics can go far, far, far in the dimension of devaluating what's happening and what's taking place. And that's why we have to be very careful in our daily lives, sitting at a dinner table and the name of a Rebbe in your son or daughter's school, the teacher or the principal's name comes up, and if the father says, who cares what he says? The impression and the impact of the totality of the reverence that a child should have for the teacher or the Rebbe or the principal is already diluted. It will never be the same. So we have to watch our hand waves and our comments in a positive way to reinforce and to be able to marshal the dignity to a topic or to a halacha or to an inyan that we can, with our short remark, substantiate and reinforce and underscore that point that had been made. Now, we find at the beginning of the Sedra that Rivka was 3 years old and Yitzchak was 40, and the pasuk says that she was expecting, and she was very troubled because when she passed a church, she felt they didn't know it was twins. And they felt that the child wanted to go out, the koyach hatumah. He was being driven to. And then when he passed a shul, a makom kadosh, she wanted to go out. So Rivka, when she felt this diversion of the child to the church or to the shul, she said, "Vatelech lidrosh lama ze anochi." What did I need this pregnancy for if he's going out, has a feeling for a church and for a shul? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Vayomer Hashem la, Shnei goyim bevitnech u'shnei le'umim mime'ayach yiparedu. You don't have one child. You have two. There's twins. And there's one pulling that way and one pulling the other way. And she was consoled. So the Meforshim should say, why? She was happy that one of her, so now she knew she had twins. But that one wants to go out to the Tumah, and she was consoled? Why did that message of having not one child inside, but two, comfort her? And the answer is, which some of the Meforshim talk about, is that when Eliyahu Hanavi asked that question, Ad Mosai Atem Poischim to Shnei Seifim, why are you dancing on both sides of the fence? One person who could want to go out to a church and at the same token pass a shul, go and want to go to the shul, is a trouble mark. Because you can't be two-sided. Are you here? Are you there? Because Rivka felt that if one son is bad, we'll work on him. You can work on a person that has been misguided, and the other one was going for good, that was wonderful. But if one child was in her womb, and it's the same person who wants to go here and go there, that's a very big problem, and that's what bothered her. And that's why the answer of two children satisfied her. You can't go out, like the Reform. If they would say, well, look, you have what was the original Torah, and we feel we don't have to do this and that. But they claim you don't have to do this and that, and that represents equal beautiful Yiddishkeit that when you ask the rabbi, to the Reform rabbi, do I have to keep kosher? And he answers and says, well, if you feel keeping kosher strengthens your Jewish identity, keep kosher. And if you feel it doesn't make the slightest difference, you don't have to keep kosher. That's called dancing on both sides of the fence. The truth and the big lie, trying to package it under the same umbrella. So that was what bothered her. And when she got the answer that it's two separate entities, she felt that bad in this world, if it's pure bad, then you can always influence it to the good side. And that's why we should never look at someone who's deficient in their Yiddishkeit as terrible people. But you have to bring them into a Shabbos Suda and let them see the dignity and the beauty and the singing and the foods that we eat, L'Kovet Shabbos and Yom Tiv, and see the beauty of what Yiddishkeit is. That will bring them under the umbrella of Yiddishkeit, true Yiddishkeit, without any type of compromise. But we have to be ready to have the patience, and we have to address ourselves in that type of a format. Now the pasuk says, "Vaye'ehav Yitzchak es Esav kitzayid befiv," that Yitzchak loved Esav. And the word Vaye'ehav, which means and he loved, is a past tense. A past tense. Then the pasuk concludes, "V'Rivka oheves es Yaakov," a present tense. Why one to the other? And Mefarshim say a very interesting nakuda. By Yidden, it is not what you do, but it's who you are. That means if a person was a big gevir and gave out tremendous tzedakah and had constant orchim in his house, and then suddenly he lost all of his money. So by the goyim, by the nations of the world, yeah, they remember that he was once a very rich man, but today they look at him inferior because he became a poor man. And we as Yidden, if this man, when he had the money, was busy doing beautiful things, going into groceries and paying up the bill for people that couldn't pay their grocery so they could walk in with dignity into the grocery and feel unembarrassed to be there. So for Yidden, we look at who you are. That means if your whole life, even if today you don't have $1, but for 45 years you were busy supporting this one and doing this and doing that. Lahavdil elef avdol, you see it by people, they were 30 years a professor of mathematics, they wrote a few books. But today, they're down and out, and that's how they're looked at by the world. Yeah, he once was this, he once was that, but today, look at him. And we would look at him as yesh chochma bagoyim ta'amin, that he produced beautiful books of chochma, of geometry and algebra and all these things. And he provided a service, a goy, to the children of every high school learning geometry, and that his value did not go down because that's who he is, and that's who he was, and that's how we will look at him now and in the future. So we have to set our moral compass in the right direction, looking at people of the value of their character and the value system of how they live their lives. And even if they're in a nursing home the last 20 years, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, of their lives, they're worthy still of the same kavod and dignity that they had when they were riding high, because they showed the world what was worthy of their time, their expertise, and their value. And this could be speaking about a housewife who was feeding an old lady 2 houses down with a warm dinner every day because she couldn't cook herself. And that makes her exemplary. And even if it comes a point that she can't do it, but this is what she showed when she could do, what was to be done and what was valuable. Now, we know that the posture of Yitzchak with Rivka, because it took them 20 years till they had children, and they were davening the whole time. Yitzchak, as I said, was 40 when he got married, but the pasuk says in our Seder at the beginning, V'Yitzchak ben shishim shana beledas osam. He was 60 when he gave birth, when Rivka gave birth to Yaakov and Esav. And Rivka was 23 when she gave birth finally to the children. And at the beginning of our Seder, it says that Avram Avinu died. It doesn't say it in our Seder, it says it last week. But Yaakov was cooking a soup. We know the halacha is that when somebody, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, loses someone that they have to sit shiva for, when they come home from the cemetery, they don't eat the food that they owned. A neighbor or a stranger or a friend brings them a tuna fish sandwich or whatever, but they're also supposed to eat a egg or something round to show that neshamas come and go. You see, when there's an end, it's like square, and there's a point that there's an end to something. It's as if that's the end. But something that's round means you could keep going because there's never an end. And that, as the Arizal in the Shar HaGilgulim writes, that people are constantly coming back, that they were deficient in an area and they have to come back and relive a life, and they're not told what they have to fix. But it says, the Arizal brings that usually the hardest thing in their life means, let's say a person's always talking Lashon Hara. They sit down to lunch with a friend, they're talking about this one and about that one. They sit down at a meeting, the first thing they bring up is, did you hear what happened or what that person did? That's a lifetime of Lashon Hara. And say the Mekubalim that usually that's the sign of why they had to come back to this world, because it seems the hardest thing for them to be able to fix and to change in their lifetime. So Esav comes into the house and Yaakov is cooking a pot of hot soup. The Medrash says that day Avram Avinu was nifter, 5 years before he was supposed to die, because all the of us were supposed to live till 180. The only one of the three who lived to 100 was Yitzchak. Avram passed away, was nifter 5 years before his time, because Hashem had Rachmanis on him. And Esav went out, that was the day of their bar mitzvah. They became bar mitzvah, and Esav went out, and the Medrash says he did the 5 worst averos that a person can do. He killed someone. He was oiver avodah zarah, and all on the same day, the day of his bar mitzvah. Vayigdalu hanaorim vayehi esav yodei tzayid ish soda. And arroyos, and he did 5 of the worst averos. So Hashem didn't want Avram Avinu to have such agmas nefesh that his grandson went out to do all of this, so he took him away from the world. So Yitzchak and Yishmael buried him, and they came home to sit Shiva. So Yitzchak was making for his father and his Yaakov was making soup for his father because it had beans, and beans are round also, just like eggs. And in comes Esav and says, and the Medrash says that had he not eaten right then, he would have died. He was so famished that he couldn't survive. And he said to him, he couldn't even identify it as a soup. He said, Haliteni no min ha'odom, this red stuff. Al kain kar shemo Edom. That's why Esav is called Edom, because Edom means red. So Yaakov turns to him and says, you know, michro li chayom, michro chayom li especho rascho li. Give me the Bechor. Now the Meforshim are a little curious. Somebody comes in that's ready to die. He's so hungry. Is that the time to take advantage and say, oh, you want some of the soup? Give me the Bechor. That was taking advantage. The man was so famished. But the Meforshim say he wasn't taking advantage, because they ask and say, what is the word kayom doing here? It could have just been michro li bechor rascha. Give me your Bechor. What's the word kayom doing in here? But what Yaakov really said to Esav, listen, you see by your activity of the day, what you were busy doing, that you're not worried about the tomorrow, about Olam Haba. It's only Olam Hazeh that you're worried about. You want the today, the Kayom. And if that's the case, what do you need it for? Sell it to me. So it wasn't like he was holding him up that he wouldn't have given him to eat. He would have, of course, he was giving him right away. Whenever he drank up the whole soup, he was so famished. But Yidden, we Yidden, Baruch Hashem Ashreinu Matov Chelkeinu Umanoim Gorelenu, that we have the opportunity and the ability to capture each and every minute and each and every day of our lives, stocking up and putting into the bank account for the tomorrow, for the Olam Haba, and you know, it's an interesting phenomenon. When we say a Dvar Torah like this, somebody would assume, oh, so in other words, from Yid, he can't have any fun, he can't enjoy a good steak, he can't, it's all Olam Haba. But the answer is that when someone in Olam Hazeh does a mitzvah, or does nitzchias, learns a Blat Gemara, he is having the benefit. And by the way, every single taiva, except for Avodah Zorah, a Yid could have in this world. That means if he's into physical pleasures, Baruch Hashem, Yidden get married, and Baruch Hashem have families and are able to have the pleasure of the companionship of marriage. People are able to eat delicious foods. Shabbos and Yom Tov, we increase it to be a tanug, to be an oineg Shabbos, a simchas Yom Tov, by eating the delicious foods and enjoying. And even on a weekday, a person makes a bracha rishoina and makes a bracha achroina. So as the Arizal says, with that bracha and the bracha achroina, he can be mala all the neshamas, because we know that neshamas go into the foods. And the Arizal has a whole list of the tzaddikim go into the fish, and the rishoyim go into the vegetables. But when you make the bracha, you can eat as much vegetable as you want. So we can accomplish, even on a weekday, enjoying the food, but putting it under the umbrella of ruchnius and asidus and eternity and olam haba at the same time. But Esav was just a man of today. He couldn't get in enough of what he wanted to do. Now, we find that the parsha says, Avram Avinu had dug up wells. And the pasuk in our Siddur says, Sitmum Pelishtim. The Pelishtim went and filled with dirt every one of those wells that there should not be. Now, Yitzchak found 2 of them, and when he was there, he was thinking about digging it up again, but the surroundings, the goyim there, started up with him, and it says that he walked away. And the 3rd well that he found was open and well, and everything was fine. And as the Chazal say, that it's a remez to the first 2 Batei Migdash that were closed, like the 2 wells, and then the 3rd, which will come to us and be here forever. But the Avram ben Harambam, the Rambam had a son named Avraham. And he says on this, that a Yid in his life has to know, just like, what did they call the well that was filled? Yitzchak named it Asik. Why? And the pasuk says, Ki hisasku imo, because they began to deal with him and talk to him about the well. Why yes, why no, why that. And Yitzchak walked away, says Avram ben Harambam. And his point is that in life, a Yid has to know when he has to throw himself into an issue and not be wishy-washy and have backbone to stand for what is right. And there's a time that when he sees that there's machloikes and there's bad feeling, and to simply walk away, move on. It's not always easy because people put forth effort and time and money into something and they want to see it succeed. They don't want to just see it go down. But Yitzchak Avinu understood that his job in this world was ruchnius. Yitzchak is the only one of the avos that was not allowed to step foot out of Eretz Yisrael. And if you remember by Sukkot, I said to you, that's the proof that every Yid has in his Sukkah, Avira de Eretz Yisrael. It's in every single Sukkah. Why? Because we invite the Ushpizin, and Yitzchak is the second night, and he's there. How could he come out of Eretz Yisrael? He was told never to leave. But because we invite him, and he's there, that's the proof that Avira de Eretz Yisrael, that the air of Eretz Yisrael is in every sukkah throughout the world, so that Yitzchak should be able to come into the sukkah and leave Eretz Yisrael. Which means he doesn't leave Eretz Yisrael, he has it in the sukkah. Now, it says that the Mefarshim bring, Kadmonim bring, that the only place that you find in the Torah the word oyev, tired, Vayavo Esav min hasada, he came from the field, Vahu oyev, he was famished, he was tired, that's what the word oyev, and it's on that the Medrash says, the 5 Averas that he did, it took all of his strength to fight with the women and everything that he did. So it says Vahu oyev. So Mefarshim say that the power of a Yid is exactly the opposite. A Goy gets tired. But v'koivei Hashem yachlifu koyach. That lo b'chayil v'lo b'koyach kiyim beruchi. That when a Yid works diligently, he is only refilling and being rejuvenated with a thrust of excitement. You find that, let's say a person was up 3 days before his chasna, preparing and writing out the seating arrangement, doing this and doing that. And on a regular day, he should be flat on his face. He should be so tired. He only slept 2 nights before the wedding, 2 hours, and the night before 5 hours. But the koyach from the excitement of the mitzvah of happening, whatever it is able to reinvigorate and you know who you found it the most by? Tzaddikim. If you took a look at Rav Elyashiv, who was already 100 years old, and he gave a shir every day, either right before Mincha or right after Mincha, and around 250 people came every day to his shir. And you could see as he said the Gemara, the life, the excitement, and that's why all these tzaddikim who learned their whole lives, Rav Steinman lived to over 100, Rav Michal Yehuda Lefkowitz over 100, as I just said, Rav Chaim was deep into his 90s, and so was Rav Baruch Mordechai Ezrachi, the Satmar Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, all in their 90s. They hardly took a vacation. These were people that were ruchni. Yet when you went in to talk to them, you felt you were enveloped and encompassed with an atmosphere of dripping kedusha and happiness. A feeling of such a people, everyone that came in was fadaiget with troubles, and they were sitting there listening to 50. The Rebbe Rashab once heard his Gabbai say that, the Rebbe at the end of the night is drenched in sweat. So the Rebbe was inside the room. He heard him. He was the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he said to the Gabbai at the end of the night when he was soaking wet, he said a person has to put himself into the place of the person with his troubles. So you have to change your clothes, in other words, figuratively, and put on his situation, and then you can be mashpia. It wasn't the Rebbe Rashab, it was the Rebbe Marash, the 4th Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he said to his Gabbai, I saw tonight 52 people. Every one of them came in with a package of tsaris. But I can't just give a bracha. I have to feel the person as if I'm in his shoes, in his clothes. And if you have to change your clothes 52 times, in 3 hours, you're going to be sweating your head off. And that's why I'm sweating. Because to be mashpia good to them, you have to be totally immersed in their position, to feel their tsar and feel their problem. So a goy may be tired, but a yid never gets tired, because his mission is of simcha. And yes, we are physically, we have to stop to eat, and we have to take a coffee or drink or whatever, but we're not under the umbrella of the physical tiredness when we are living our lives day by day under the umbrella of ruchnias. And that's why anyone that went into these tzaddikim for a yechidus or to speak to, everyone said the same thing. You felt the elevation being by the tzaddikim. Now, unfortunately, there has been an outbreak in the last month of terrible anti-Semitism. And tzaddikim, they once asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe, could the Holocaust ever happen here in America? And he said, in a minute, in the next day. And we who are comfortable in America and everything, and the Eibishter will help, and please bring Mashiach before any trouble. But you see people who never voiced their hatred for Jews. Today there were 15 cities, 2 in Australia, all over the world, with protests against the Jews. Not pro-Palestinian, which they had that too, but the idea of wiping out lo aleinu, lo aleichem, 1,000 times the yid. And that's entrenched in their DNA. And it's something that people always thought that if we sit down with them, or we give the Arabs from the land in Eretz Yisrael, which is an Isser D'Oraisa to do, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Yidden the land of Eretz Yisrael to develop, to live in, to enjoy, to bask in the Kedusha, but it's not theirs to give away. And for the first 50 years of the Medina, those first 50 years, you didn't have grenades in the restaurants and things, but once they started with Rabin to give land, that's when you had the barrage with all these grenades in here. I mean, there was an occasional killing, and there was something that happened throughout the years. I'm not saying it was a perfect record, but what went on for the next 25 years was because of the land that they were so thirsty to give away. And you see Gaza, that people came there and lived there, grandfathers, sons, grandsons, building the most beautiful paradise. If you saw the pictures of those who were dealing in flowers, when they planted and what came up years later, it was a wonderland of freshness. It was the most beautiful, beautiful. And those with the wineries, the most delicious wines in the Gaza. And then they made them take out, unfortunately, the prime minister who did it fell into a coma and remained 8 years in a coma. And his assistant, the accomplice, ended up in jail for many years. Their careers, their lives were finished. And the lives of the people that were thrown out of their 50-year home and fields ended up with a battery of psychiatrists. Because when you take something that you were sowing and harvesting and planting and watering with the sweat of your brow, suddenly taken away from you, and it was all destroyed. They didn't take over these businesses to continue. These Arabs want only one thing: to destroy Eretz Yisrael, to destroy Yidden, and to destroy America. And let there be no doubt about what their intention is. And of course, Mashiach is the bottom line, the ultimate answer, which will propel us into a realm of such delight and such goodness that we will be able to bask in the luster of glory, Leolam Vo'ed. But till we get there, it's not such an easy trip. But we find in the Sedra, the reason I brought up this anti-Semitism is because when they said to Yitzchak, Lech meimanu, ki atzamta mimenu, go away from us. You've become too rich and too strong, too powerful. We don't want you here. We can't even compete with you. Please leave. And Meforshim, I don't know if it's the Sipurna, one of them say that when he said Kiyat Samta, when they said Kiyat Samta Mimenu, that our money that we should have been getting is Mimenu. It was taken from us. You, the Jews, have it. What we could have thrived and we could have had if you wouldn't have been here to compete and to live here and to that. You took it from us. And the Meforshim say that this is one of the places that we find the blatant anti-Semitism when it was said to Yitzchak in his face, point blank. So we shouldn't fool ourselves. We have to be courteous. We have to be law-abiding. We have to be pleasant. We have to be a role model to open a door in a store. Some elderly person, very possibly a goy, is coming through, to hold the door for the 30 seconds and not to just let it slam in the face of the elderly person. We should be a walking Kiddush Hashem. Like you see, you have no idea how bad it is when two cars pull up to a red light and the left lane is supposed to turn left and the right lane is supposed to go straight. But this guy, because there was a line turning left, went into the other lane and went all the way up front and stopped, and when the light turned green, cut out the person who rightfully was turning left to get in front of him. Now, when that driver sees the driver who's cutting him out with a beard or a black hat or a yarmulke, what kind of a chillul Hashem is that? So we have to live properly and do our best, but we will never win over the goy, and we will never solve the problem until Mashiach comes. Now, I want to say to you that we have in this parsha a parsha that's very hard to understand. Yaakov Avinu went into he's supposed to be Yaakov Avinu Titein Emes Yaakov, that he's the pillar of truth and the yesod and foundation of truth. Yet we find he went into Yitzchak and he looks like the most deceitful, lying. I mean, he went to fool and deceive his father, and he succeeded. And it was really a mistake on Yitzchak's part. And it's hard to say on Yitzchak Avinu, who was an oiled tamima. But you see at the end of the story that he admitted that it was his mistake. even though when he discovered that Esav walks in and says, okay, Tata, I'm here to get the brachas. And Yitzchak says, what? Who are you? I just gave you the brachas. And it says, Vayechrad Yitzchak charada gedola. He was trembling. He saw Gehenim open. The Medrash says, in front of him, that he gave the brachas to the wrong son. So according to that story, when Yitzchak saw Yaakov right after that, he should have said to him, what did you do? You came into me and said you were Esav and I gave you the... Why did you do... But that's not what we see in this week's Parsha. The minute he came in, the first thing Yitzchak said, Vayevorech Oso. He gave him a bracha. Because he realized in full sight that rightfully Yaakov created a situation that produced the brachas for him. Now, Rivka, and it was with Ruach HaKodesh, saw that Yaakov Avinu had to have the brachas. And to give you an example, if someone takes poison and puts it into a cup and drinks the poison, under normal circumstances, they're going to die. Lo aleinu, lo aleichem. But there are certain medicines, like we should never know it, chemotherapy, different things, they have poison in it. But the proper dose and the proper usage and the format, it kills away certain bad. And the poison is very effective. Rivka realized that we need, until Mashiach will come, her children have to be imbued with the appreciation of negativity. That when we deal with the Goyim, that we sometimes, for survival and for the good of a situation, we have to deviate. Otherwise, what was Rivka doing over here? Yitzchak was greater than she was. She was davening in a corner for children. She wasn't answered. Yitzchak, who was the son of Avram Avinu, he was answered. They were in two different corners. And his tefillah, Vayeyoser lo Hashem v'lo lo, not to her, to him, because who he was. And Rivka realized that until Mashiach comes, we always have to throw a bone, the poison, to the Samach Mem, to the Goyim. That's why the Arizal says that when we wash Mayim Achronim, the Gemara says that we wash Mayim Achronim because there's salt. In those days, it was very bad salt, and if you touched your eye with it, Chas v'shalom lo aleinu, a person could become blind. But we wash, says the Arizal, Mayim Achronim al pi Kabbalah, to throw a bone to the Chitzonim, to the Yetzer Hara, to make him happy. Because after a Suda, that we sang Zmiris, and we said Divrei Torah, and we had such Simcha and Oinig Shabbos, that the Yetzer Hara is bursting at his seams with jealousy and anger. So we wash Mayim Achronim to throw him a bone. That's what the Arizal says. And that, he says, is why we have hairs on the tefillin. Those hairs that are there, because tefillin accomplishes so much with moichin, a person who's busy thinking about bad things in his mind, dirty things, bad things, negative things. Tefillin is a cure for it. And Rabbeinu Tam is even a higher madrega of being metaher and mezachech the machshava. So we put the hairs on, says the Arizal, as a bone to throw to someone. Okay, you keep happy. Here's yours. In the middle of this mitzvah. So Rivka realized that, of course, lying is poison. But this poison because, for instance, she told Yaakov to go outside and get Shnei Se'irim. The Medrash says, the Gemara says, that because she took those 2 goats, Klal Yisrael had the power of So'ir LaHashem and So'ir LaZozel. For their whole time, with the Mishkan and with the Batei Migdash and with their, from those 2 that she did, her kavanah was so high. And when Yitzchak said, make me tasty, Yitzchak wasn't interested in, if we said the Chafetz Chaim told his Rebbetzin, and make me those delicious, the Chafetz Chaim wasn't worried. Yeah, he ate and he benched and he was with people, but he wasn't into the tastiness of, so certainly Yitzchak Avinu wasn't into that. But what he meant by matamim, things that he could put in his mouth, that the shechita with the kavanah should be proper, and that all the ruchnius that goes into shechita and cooking and everything else. Like it says that Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev used to go into the kitchen and smell the pots. So one of the tzaddikim who used to make fun, one of his contemporaries, Reb Baruch Mimezhebush, used to make fun of him. So at the end of his life, Reb Baruch Mimezhebush said, do you think that I was just out to make fun of Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev? But when I used to cry by Tikkun Chatzos, and I wanted the Beis HaMikdash, they would answer me in heaven, what do you need the Beis HaMikdash for? That they'll be maktir ketoiris? When Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev goes into the kitchen and he smells the pots, his kavan, his machshava is like the kohen, or the kohen gadol, being maktir ketoiris in the Beis HaMikdash. And in heaven, that's how it smelled, the reach nichoyach, from his smelling in the kitchen. So who needs the third Beis HaMikdash? So I was busy knocking him down the whole time to get that taina in heaven away. So Rivka realized that this was not just a question of brachas. It was a question of avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. It was a question of asidus, of Klal Yisrael. I mean, it was so holy. It says, even the Gemara says, that the man that was appointed to take the So'ir LaZozel, he took it to the edge, to the cliff, and he threw it off. That man died that year. Not that minute. During that there was never somebody of all the 1,100 years that they brought the So'ir LaZozel, the 2 Batei Migdash and the Mishkan, that the man didn't die. So they asked, so why would somebody want to do it? Knowing that he's going to die that year? And the Meforshim answer, because he wanted the schus of bringing the kapara, a clean slate for Klal Yisrael completely. And it was a schus, and he was happy to do it, that Klal Yisrael should have a beautiful upcoming year. The Eibusha should help us, that we should be able to have a clean slate and a wonderful simchadik year with Achenu b'nei Yisrael hanesunim batzara v'ashivya ha'omdim bein bayam uvein bayabasha hamakom yerachem aleim v'yotziem mitzara l'ravacha u'mishibad l'gula hashta ba'agola u'vizman koriv v'nomar amen.